Hey, what's up, guys? You're listening to the Zack Scriven podcast, and in this episode, I'm talking with Colby Clegg, co-director of software engineering and inductive automation, who have made themselves famous on the Ignition platform. I'm sure you guys are all aware of it. But anyways, I wanted to, before I share this podcast with you guys, first take a chance to thank my sponsor for Automation Month, which is 4.0 Solutions. You know, we've talked about a lot of the other best-in-class products, but today, Ignition being one of the best-in-class SCADA, MES, and rapid application development platforms. But anyways, I wanted to take this time to actually talk a little bit more about 4.0 Solutions. You know, Walker Reynolds, industry thought leader in Industry 4.0, he created 4.0 Solutions to help drive the industry forward, to help change the way people think and shift thinking from Industry 3.0 to Industry 4.0. You know, while he's known for architecting 4.0 solutions and helping clients, hardware manufacturers, software manufacturers, and end users and OEMs figure IIoT out, figure out Industry 4.0, while he's known for that, and also doing video content, while he's known for that, he's also known for just making this podcast possible and just being also an expert within Ignition. Thank you, 4.0 Solutions. Definitely check them out. If you guys are looking for help in navigating 4.0, Industry 4.0, looking at IIoT solutions, reach out to Walker, reach out to 4.0 Solutions. That's what they're there for. That's what we're here for. Obviously I have a huge affiliation with them, helping Walker out, helping 4.0. They're a sponsor of this podcast. So I just really wanted to take this episode to thank them and to thank you guys for listening. Now, I really hope you guys enjoy this podcast with Colby Clegg, co-director engineering software, inductive automation. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
Good. You mind if I get your headset on? You mind if I use this headset, or you think I should go
No, that's good.
headsetless? And then my computer here is, the camera's down here. I got to remember to look at it.
No, it's fine. You can look at whatever. I look at the camera, but then I'll glance up and look at.
The problem is I'm looking at you and it looks like I'm looking over here, man. The camera's down here, so I'm gonna put you right here in the corner.
Yeah, okay, that works. So, man, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. So, how are the new offices?
Well, the new offices are great. I mean, we you know how it goes. You move in the first day and you think, oh man, we have all this space, we're never going to use it. And then here we are a year later and we're like, oh, we're kind of full, but we're not really full. We got a lot of space left, but it's good. It's a good spot. And people come here, they really like it. The training room is awesome. So it's a good spot.
I've been enjoying your guys' Instagram feed. There's a lot of good pictures of the office and, the different side of the company that we maybe don't get to see in the general marketing message. You kind of get a different side of Inductive.
Yeah, for sure. It's oh, sorry, man. Let me take care of something. Is it all right if I?
No problem. So, yeah, tell me about Ignition. Well, let's just start it from the beginning, man. Like factory PMI back in the early days. How did it all start?
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, I mean, at the beginning, we basically had an integration company. Or I shouldn't say there was an integration company, Calmetrics. Steve Heckman had run it for a while, like 15 years or so, I think, when I showed up there. And he was a pretty typical integrator. They had about maybe 8 engineers or so, and they were doing projects around the greater Sacramento region and a little bit further afield. They had some customers here and there just through contacts, how it kind of grows. So mostly food and beverage, a lot of wineries, a lot of packaging lines for different, manufacturing companies. And anyhow, so I didn't know Steve. And they didn't really have any particular in-house software at the time, but he had a family friend. He had a son of a friend who was interning there, during his high school years and so on. That guy ended up going to UC Davis, which is where he met myself and some of the other people around here now.
Right.
So at the end of my junior year, going into summer, the guy was like, "Hey, you looking for a summer job?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Well, I work for this company. They need a new website." I go, "Sure, okay, I've done that before. That's what I was doing in college to make some money." So I went out and I worked on the website for a day, and then I met Steve. And at that time, we got to talking, and he just said, I have some ideas for like just little utility software that would help our business. And, I'm just looking for somebody to make it. I said, hey, I like doing that. I got some friends we like doing that. Let's work on that. And so he said, sure. And we went ahead over the summer and started working on some of those little utilities he had in mind. That eventually grew into Factory SQL. Factory SQL was our first product. And the whole idea was to bridge data from PLCs into a database, because the crux of Steve's idea, this was 2003. So at that time, in the IT space, databases, MySQL, Postgres, these open source, essentially free databases were being used everywhere. They're all over the IT space. But in the industrial world, they have these incredibly expensive historians, right? And they have all of these old systems. The data was in the format, your advanced data connection was, pulling values into Excel over DDE, Of course, there's OPC, and that was involved. But, it's all very, difficult. And you're trying to do trends, you're trying to do any kind of, analysis, and it's tough. And so his thought was like, well, if we could just get into a database, we could do all sorts of things. We could relate it to shifts. We could relate it to that. Relational databases are great for relating. So that was the crux of the idea. So that's how we started. We started with Factory SQL as a data bridge between PLCs and databases. And then as time went on,
how did that product do on its own?
It was great for an in-house tool, right? It was, at the beginning, it was great for our integration business.
So you just used it for your own customers and things like that, or you'd also sell it?
Yeah, for the first few years, it was really just something for Calmetrics to stand out, to solve problems for the customers, right? They would be able to go in, and it was just really, they had encountered a lot of frustration going in, and the customer says, well, hey, I want to trend this process, I want to collect this data and trend it. And like, well, all right, we're looking at a, historian, we're looking at a trending package, all these different things, right? So like, well, we can just throw this in here, collect data into MySQL for free, make a PHP web page that shows some charts, and now we've got what they want. And as an integrator, we had very little overhead in that. It was just most of our billable hours, So that's the idea. The problem was, PHP websites at the time, web pages at the time, Ajax wasn't even a thing. So it was a little bit cumbersome for like real-time monitoring. It didn't really work really well.
Right.
So that's where Factory PMI came in. So we decided to make a database front-end tool, a way to build more, these real-time visualization tools that would serve the needs of that, space. And so that's about the time where, we started doing that. And we also started to step back and say, well, if this is benefiting us, I'm sure there's a lot of other integrators who would benefit from it as well. And on top of that, no customer wants to buy software from, custom built by an integrator, because relationships with integrators are very, I'll be generous and say dynamic, right? Fluid, there's things go well, things go bad, you switch, people move, all these things happen, right? So I don't think anybody would really want to, say, hey, this integrator, he's making software, sure, I'll put that in and depend on it for a long time. So we said, well, okay, for long-term stability, we need it. And to make more money, we need to have our own software company to sell this, and support it. And that's how Inductive Automation came around. That was in 2006 or so. So we had those first 3 years of basically, using the product for our own purposes, eating our own dog food, if you will. We didn't really think of ourselves as a software startup. We thought of it, we were just solving problems for our customers but I guess to some degree, I'm being a software person. Yeah, I'm focused on the software side, not so much the integration. So that's how the early days went. So we had Factory SQL collecting data, Factory PMI publishing that data, making and then in today's terms, these products basically got rolled in. I can tell the rest of the story with Ignition, but you've got the Vision module right now where you're building these visualization screens that are then launched out to all your runtime clients. That was the heart of Factory PMI. Right. PMI stood for Plant Management Interface. We figured we needed a new term, as people like to make up terms. But
and now with Perspective, you've built a rapid IDE for React applications, like web-based applications, and a native app for control systems. So that's freaking amazing to go from just let me just build this tool to put data in a database, give it to me in MySQL, and now it's its own thing now, which is amazing. What other where else can we build React apps with an IDE like what you guys have built with Perspective?
I don't know. I'm pretty psyched about it. It's not even my project, right? It's not my project, so I get to be the hype man. I think it's incredible. We don't talk about it so much as like you know, yeah, it is based around React, which is great. It's based around, people like to boil it down to just like, HTML5 and CSS and all that stuff. But it's a rapid design environment for really modern web applications, right? I don't know where anything like that exists because, for this project, we really, really, first of all, we waited years to do it on purpose because like we knew what we wanted to pull off and we didn't think that the environment was quite right. Even during this process, how this goes. This current environment's crazy. Things are changing every day. Frameworks are going out, different ones are coming in.
Yeah.
But we waited till we thought, okay, we can build what we want out of this, which is what we wanted was, a ground up approach to a modern, building a modern control system, not just, a mobile application. I mean, we talk about it in terms of mobility because it's, so good at that. But, we wanted this to be the platform for the next, for the upcoming future, So I think it's pretty incredible. Now, what's even better is that, it's the latest visualization layer on top of our Ignition platform, which we've been working on now for like 15 years.
Right.
So
perspective is just
in some
one,
regards, the tip of that.
Perspective is just one module, and Ignition 8 has features new to the platform itself, right?
Yeah, Ignition 8 has a lot of new features. It has a lot of improvements. It's a continuation of what we've been doing. So it's we've said it, we've put it before that it's a new start that's also a continuation, if that can be true. Because when we launched Ignition in 2010 is I think when the first version of Ignition came out. The first version 7, right? 7.0. That was a cute play on our previous, versions. We kind of put them together and thought, why not? So version 7.0 was the first launch. We didn't know at the time when 8 would come out. We thought, yeah, we'll do some minor updates and we'll come out with 8. 8 years later, we finally are here with 8 because those minor versions ended up being bigger and bigger and bigger. And we just rolled with that for a long time. But the point is that it also overlaps with our growth as a company, the growth of our user base, the sophistication of the applications people are doing. And so all of that kind of goes together to form a situation where every version is we introduce things that are based on the feedback we get, on the ideas we have, on those changing dynamics. 8.0 is our chance to really step back and say, okay, we've been working on this for 8 years. What would we really like to change? What do we think we really need to do to set ourselves up for the next iteration, right? So on one hand, you can install 8.0 and it'll upgrade from Ignition 7.0. Your system from 8 years ago will upgrade to 8.0. On the other hand, we've broken a few things. We've taken things that have been deprecated for a while, cleaned it up, and we've introduced new foundational technology to help us do all that, right?
What's the new foundational technologies?
Well, mostly perspective, right? So perspective is far from a finished product. It's a starting point for a lot more to come, right?
Okay.
So we have our, the components that's in there right now, and we've got a lot of great foundational features. We try to do everything in an extensible way. So, there's the new data binding models, the new data transformations. Those are all extensible. So we've implemented, a number of cool things that are beyond what you could have done before. But, we have a lot more, a lot of other ideas and for components and so on.
I have a question.
From other parts of the system. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask what day Ignition 8 will fully be released, but what I will ask is when Ignition 8 is, full public release, will Ignition 8 be on Inductive University and specifically, perspective, how to use perspective videos?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely will. We have, I think something like 130 videos that'll come out at that time.
Very nice.
Full support on it. Inductive University is an incredible thing. It's, we knew it was a good idea, but it's been super successful. I don't have we've got tens of thousands of people on there. We've got, millions of video views. And so we've just got so much feedback that people, just crazy stuff. I'd like to kind of look at it, we haven't done any kind of like scientific study, but, we get all this feedback all the time. Like some guy improves, like, I'm fresh out of college, but I just got my first integration job because I was certified on IU,
That's
so
amazing.
it's incredible. And so it's definitely a key component to everything we do now. So yeah, perspective will be on there for sure.
That's a crazy story.
So,
I recommend to everyone that's in this industry looking to get a job is to just go out and get certified on IU, because it's completely free and it shows that you're willing to learn, and you could pretty much learn how to do a typical SCADA job, like, within like a week on Inductive University. It's amazing. And that it's free,
Yeah, it's free, and I don't think it takes that much time. And even if the company you're going to isn't using Ignition, I mean, it's how many places in this industry exist where you can you go get a few certifications, and it's it's just you show up at an interview and you've got these industry specific things. It's interesting, I didn't like I said, I got started straight out of UC Davis, computer science engineering background. I wasn't involved in industrial space. This is a really interesting world, right? You've spent your whole life in it, I think. And, I'll ask you, I mean, what do you think? Isn't this an incredible industry where, like, when you show up with a little bit of background knowledge, you get really far, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. And, it's always interesting hearing the stories of people that have been involved in the industry. And it's always very different because there's no clear path to it. Like if you were a doctor, for example. So that's really unique about the industry. And yeah, like that you don't necessarily need a lot of like degrees to get a project done, especially with tools like Ignition, making it so easy. And, I'm actually really passionate about like video training, because I'm actually developing my own course right now. It should be already released by the time this airs, but it's crushing LinkedIn video. And so I'm basically trying to help train someone how to use LinkedIn to, crush their career goals. And I'm pretty excited about it. So the point is, though, it takes a lot of work. And so that's like really amazing that you guys have put that entire like 1,000, videos. Like, it's a lot of work,
It is a lot of work, but we knew that, part of our gig is that we're streamlined. We try to stay streamlined, right? It's pretty incredible. What we've done with the fact that we're all here in this office. We have to do things in a smart way, and so we can't. We have this training room. People come here for training. 3 weeks a month. That's great, but we're not going to reach the whole world that way, right? We knew we need to get the information out there in a more effective way. It's a lot, of what you're talking about how people can apply that same thing in their own life. They got to get themselves out there, get their goals out there, and you just got to reach people, right? That's how you have a big impact from a small footprint, I think.
Yeah, and that's why I'm really honored that you're taking the time to be on the podcast. I'm very thankful that you're doing this. And last year when I started Automation Month, I had like this crazy, like one of my crazy dream guests was like Don Pearson. So now to actually be talking to someone at the C level of Inductive is really you're kind of like one of my dream guests, man.
Well, that's overly generous, but I'll say part of why I was happy to do it is because as I've told you on the side, this industry is it needs the editorial state of this industry is a little bit antiquated, in my opinion. So I like what you're doing. I like what I think that for us to be effective, I mean, it comes back to what we were just talking about how people get involved in this industry. It's true. Very few people set out to be an industrial automation engineer or a SCADA engineer or something like that. People find their way here, and so we need more of that. We're desperate for people, right? And that requires us to reach those people through information and through content. So I like what you're doing because I think that that's an important part of how we do that, right? So anyhow, yeah, I'm
going to the CSIA Executive Users Conference in Virginia, I believe, in May, May. What would you want to see? I know you guys you specifically may not be there, but Inductive is going to be there. They're sponsoring the event.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are some type of videos or, you know, content that you'd want to see in your LinkedIn feed from Zack Scriven Media?
Well, I think it's, you know, interesting to look at the role of, I mean, I'm curious because see, now that I, you know, like starting off actually doing integration myself as part of building the software to where I am now, where I'm pretty far removed, I depend on, you know, content like what you're putting out and like that to kind of help connect me to our customers, right? I mean, people come here and they talk to us and that's important. But from day to day, you know, it's hard for me to get connected in there. So what I'm curious about are like, you know, how integrators are, what their relationship to the customers is like right now, right? There's this ebb and flow over time of companies, you know, leaning on integrators, then pulling things in house, then going back out, you know. And so, you know, in this environment where companies are desperate to digitize, to, you know, you hear all this stuff, we're talking about all these things about the digital transformation, Industry 4.0, all of that. In this current space, what's the role of the integrator? How are they keeping up? What do they need in order to feel empowered? All that kind of stuff, right? It's maybe not new subjects, but it's in a new context all the time. I think that's, you know, that's one thing. You know, if you're talking about the CSIA where you have all these integrators there,
yeah, that makes sense.
That's something.
The integrator of the future, it needs to adapt because the way that we used to do things is kind of built around, you know, not those scalable technologies or not like digital technologies like video or like, you know, IIoT. So I mean, and I think that the future of integration that I see is employees and individuals become more autonomous to kind of freely move throughout the industry, from project to project through digital platforms, you know, like platforms like Automate America, or like I've used Upwork, to kind of, you know, not have the traditional limitations of a 9 to 5 like brick and mortar integration, kind of more of like a digital system integrator. So that's kind of where I see it going. I don't know exactly how that'll look though.
Yeah. Well, would you say it's like maybe the personnel version of loosely coupled versus tightly coupled, right? Like in our technological space, right? I see this kind of cyclical nature of open versus closed, tightly coupled versus loosely coupled. I feel like what you're talking about is you know, right now we're in a phase technologically of getting back into this idea of loosely coupled. You've got IoT at the heart of it is distributed loosely coupled systems, right? You're putting data up, the idea of the digital twin, you're disconnecting, you know, these systems so that you can operate on them more freely. I think what you're describing in that sense is the same thing from a personnel point of view, right? Where you've got the ability to take transferable skills and apply them to lots of different companies,
Right.
lots of different places, right?
That's why I'm a huge advocate of video, because, you know, I say to a lot of people that are looking to do that, they can't just do that and operate offline like you would be able to as a brick and mortar integrator. You need to have, like, all the leads that I've gotten off Upwork, it's all been inbound people that I'm driving to that platform through the content that I create. So I have to create this digital twin of myself in video online to actually service that type of model. But if you kind of adopt it from a holistic perspective, you know, from integration to marketing to, you know, everything, it's all digitally having to shift to. Explain to me that loosely coupled versus tightly coupled concept, because I'm
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I just think of it in terms of, you know, let's look at it like this. There's this, to me, there really is this cycle, right? People say, we have this system, but all of the data inside of it it's a black box. We can't get to it, right? So we're dependent on what that provider gives us. And then we're, you know, if they want to jack the price up, we're stuck. So people start to say, well, let's figure out ways to decouple that and to make it so that these systems can just, you know, be a little bit more loosely coupled and share data between them, and that'll give us more flexibility. So then you get into a more open environment where we say, okay, well, we've got the data here, we've got these standards in place where we can take, like let's take in our world OPC. That was a big stepping stone, right? So now you've got this decoupled, you've got the standard in the middle that decouples the source of the data from then the uses of the data. Now we can do more with it. That gets further and further along. You've got all of these systems that don't have to be by the same vendor, but they understand the core data, they understand the component parts, and you can build really flexible solutions. And then that goes to the point where then somebody eventually says, well, we've got all these different pieces, and they're kind of working together, and they're kind of doing something. But if we had one person who could take it all and put it together, we could do something really much better, and that's how the cycle kind of closes, I think.
Oh,
but anyhow,
interesting.
Right now we're in a point where we're on this resurgence of open, accessible data. We do a lot with MQTT. We're involved with Sparkplug B, right? That I
was going to ask you what you think of Sparkplug B, or what you know about it.
Yeah, I could talk about it quite a bit, but the heart of it is like this: MQTT, right, is a protocol. It's a way of transferring data, and so everybody was. Let's say maybe 2 years ago, year and a half ago, everyone's excited about MQTT. So then the question is, that's great. We can all send stuff, but what is it that we're sending? How does system A, who sends something to system B over MQTT, what is it that it's sending, and how does it understand it? And there's no answer for that, right? They go, it could be JSON. That could be JSON. That's fine. Still doesn't quite define what the data is, right? That's just an encoding for stuff. But that kind of is at odds with the fact that MQTT is supposed to be lightweight. JSON is not exactly super lightweight encoding. So, Cirrus Link, those guys over there, Arlen Nipper, who's one of the co-inventors of MQTT, and he's been thinking about this stuff for a long time. His background is in the industrial control space, right? They said, well, let's just build something that solves that problem. So they came up with Sparkplug, which was it's a definition of data. It's based off of Google protobufs. So the way that technology works is you write a definition of data, and then you compile that into a payload format that is very efficient. And so then you can take whatever data that conforms to that, put it in there, encode it, and it's just very lightweight. And then anybody who has that definition can read it, right? And they took that and they made it open. And so it does two things. One is that it actually creates structure that is compatible or that supports what we do in the industrial world, right? So it's generic, but it's also, somewhat, guided towards what we're trying to do. And then the second thing is that it's completely open, and it's completely, it's based off of technology, like I said, like protobufs, which are, I don't know the exact license, but it's something really lenient like MIT or, maybe Google's own thing that's, very open. And so basically everybody can take that and just start using it and understand the data. So that's great. It's a very pragmatic solution to what we're trying to do, which is transfer data, over MQTT. And so maybe that's why it's taken off so fast. So now where we're at is we have a ton of companies in this space. I believe, first of all, they've taken that spec and put it into the Eclipse Foundation. So nobody around here is in charge of it. Owns it, right? It's completely open. And then now we're getting into where there's going to be more and more, I don't know if it's going to be standardization or, conformance, but the goal now is to take it and make something that can stand as a real standard, Yeah. It's become a very quick ad hoc standard. Everyone's adopted it because it's a great way to just make shareable data. But that's the point. That's the goal.
Yeah. So one thing that I've noticed is, Ignition, Inductive Automation, and Cirrus Link, they were really kind of the first ones to adopt Sparkplug B. And some people, have come to recognize it as that's the protocol you want to speak if you want to connect to Ignition. How do we reframe that to it is an open protocol and other platforms are adopting it, and it's not just for Ignition, but it's actually something that anyone should look at for?
I don't have. I mean, maybe the easiest answer to that is that if what's the alternative, right? And what is the competing most popular technology?
OPC,
maybe. Yeah, but let's stay inside of the MQTT realm. Let's stay inside of the there's certainly other IoT protocols, right? AMQP. I don't know. There's like 20 of them that are somewhat popular. But if we even stay inside of MQTT, if we're going to achieve anything, we have to have some sort of standard of what the protocol is and what the payload is.
A language.
I don't see that happening right now. And then that standards, if we did go about it from a point of view of like, hey, we need an industrial standard, which I'm sure I know there are organizations that have worked on this before. I think IBM has one. I don't know. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But if we go down that route, it's going to take forever. And then you have to get the vendors to adopt it. Well, kind of by, I don't even want to say accident, but somewhat by accident, this Sparkplug-B spec has taken off from a just like I said, pragmatic point of view, from an actual application point of view. So now we've got 20 or so vendors who are in our program, right? Our onboard program.
Opto 22.
Yeah, you got a lot of those. Yeah, people who are buying in. I'm mixing some of the tech a little bit, right? Because if I talk about our onboard program, you talk about Ignition Edge, you talk about whatever. But let's just keep it on MQTT right now. These different vendors who are putting Sparkplug-B in their devices, and it's pretty easy. It's really easy to make it work, right? Somebody can. One of these, providers can put Sparkplug-B compatibility in probably a couple days, and then somebody else who has a different product could adopt it in a couple days. So it's very easy to use, and so it has nothing to do with Ignition, right? Ignition was one of the first providers or platforms to publish that data, and right now with Edge on all these devices, it's being used in that way to publish this data. But the data itself is open for anyone to use through that Sparkplug-B. So, how do we change the
narrative?
The narrative, it's just a use case point of view. I mean, I think, there's real discussion to be had in terms of the level of standardization or conform or certification that a standard should have, right? Should Sparkplug be a, ISO recognized standard or something? Should there be some sort of standards body governing it? Whatever, that's one discussion to have. And some companies require that. If you're putting it in some places, and we're going through that, we're seeing it. Some of those companies are interested, but so that's being kind of worked out. But from a practical point of view, if we want to get data into the most shareable format possible, this is something that's being adopted across the industry, and it's not tied to inductive automation or Cirrus Link. So just knowing that is something, right? So Sparkplug-B is being adopted or being put into the Eclipse Foundation. I think it's being elevated to their higher level of project where it has a working group around it. And so that's the starting point, right? That immediately disconnects it from our name or Cirrus Link. It's just an encoding technology that has a working group level status in the Eclipse Foundation, totally open. So let's go from there and just see, who wants to adopt it.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I'm actually working on a Ignition IIoT project through my Upwork contract, actually. An OEM that I'm working with, they do water treatment skids, like packaged up into a shipping container using ozone. And it's all Ignition Edge and using the MQTT modules. And there's a Ignition server sitting on a Azure cloud server, like controlling it all. And we're actually, Marcus, the guy who hired me, he's like a React developer. Like he is developing, we're developing our own front end for, sitting on top of Ignition to kind of display to the customers from like a global perspective, but like down at the actual individual unit level, it's just Edge and Vision windows, kind of like a HMI. So, but he and I were going to talk about this a lot. Is we go back and forth on this, like, developing an app in perspective versus rolling it yourself and controlling the source code, and kind of like the difference is like Ignition's great in that you can, perspective, you get going like within minutes and, watch a few videos, boom, now you're developing web apps and you're already familiar with the Ignition interface, which by the way, Ignition 8 interface looks really sick in the designer. I love it. But,
good.
so, you get started way ahead, but then as you get further deeper into use cases in the technology, you might run into limitations that then would be dependent upon, if there's like some feature that came out that we needed to add, Inductive would have to add it to the modules first, and then we could have access to that versus controlling the source code. Harder to get started, more of a learning curve, but more freedom and, possibilities. And so, yeah, what's your thoughts on that debate?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a tale as old as time, I think, because, when we got started, our biggest competitor wasn't, you might think, oh, maybe it's Wonderware, maybe it's whatever, Rockwell, but it was custom developed SCADA solutions, HMIs. I mean, a VB Studio, VB.net or VB6, So this has always been the debate, custom built versus, packaged product. As it applies to perspective, I think, it's still a valid debate. One thing to remember about what you're building in perspective is that you're building a project defined with building blocks that we've developed, right? We've defined these are the components of what is going to be possible in terms of, what a component is, how its state is defined, how the data model is defined, how the data binding works. None of that has anything to do with React. It's technology independent from the actual end product, right? And so then perspective behind the scenes, the code is taking that definition and turning it into React and what you see. So one of the biggest points that I would argue, and that has always been the argument for packaged software, is maintainability, right? So when those web frameworks change and the technology set changes, and 5 years from now, maybe React isn't even a thing anymore, who knows, right? It's up to us to make sure that your project continues to work in a way that's suitable for the end use. And in the meantime, you would have had to rewrite completely your custom built application, right? So having this intermediate format is useful and helps with that. Now, the other point, I think where Ignition is really strong is that we do strive to have it be an open platform still. So there is still a lot of extensibility you can do with your own custom development on top of Ignition without, any charge from us. So that's kind of, that really is kind of Ignition's final mile secret sauce, is that it's, if you were going to develop something completely from scratch, you could do that. Or you could take Ignition to start with and build your special part right on top of it for free. We don't charge for the platform. We don't charge, it's not for free. You'd have to buy the perspective module and all that. So I'm not trying to argue on price, but you get the idea. It's worth a lot of time, which is worth a lot of money. So that's kind of the thing. Ignition allows for that final mile building. So I think it's worth it. I don't think, I think if you do something straight from scratch, you can do exactly what you want, but it's going to be less maintainable by the customer. It's going to be less likely to last in the future. So
yeah, that's kind of the conclusion that we usually arrive at, is that for like an integrator where you're developing project after project for different customers, Ignition and perspective totally makes sense. For him, being that he's developing it in-house and he can kind of keep building upon it. I mean, really, his curse is the curse of knowledge. Like, he can actually develop in React. So for him, he thinks it, he thinks of it as easier. And he's like, well, look how many React developers are. There's like millions, whereas there's only so many controls engineers. And then my response to that is, yeah, but your typical controls engineer is maybe not developing web applications. Maybe they're developing PLC code. Boom, with perspective, now all of a sudden they have the ability to develop their own web apps, and so you're reaching a whole new developer market.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it really depends on the nature of your project. If you're trying to develop a product and you're going to support it and you're going to make it into a, because, and maybe you never know when you're starting when something's actually going to take off and become something that does become your, all of a sudden you're a software company with a software product that you're maintaining, right? That's a possibility. But right, I mean, in terms of developers, right, there are a lot of Java developers out there, but people don't sit down and rewrite all of Ignition every time they want it, right? Because it's just, you benefit from, having a tool set that does so much for you. But, I'm reminded of last year at the ICC, we did a session about open technology, and Mike Milinkovich, who's the president of the Eclipse Foundation, he said something that I hope I don't misquote very much, but he's pointing out that something like, when you take an idea that you have and you say this is a really special idea, only about 10% of that is actually special, right? And so to do all this work, to build all this foundation, to then just deliver 10% of innovation, it just doesn't make sense. And that's why open source software is so important. That's why open technologies are important. It gets you that 90% so that you're able to deliver your 10% so much more quickly. Now, React has a lot of, it's not starting at zero. You've got a huge community of things. So I'm just trying to point out, but it's.
Can you drop React components into perspective and have those render on the screen, or?
Oh, you can fairly easily package them up you'd have to do a little bit of work to make a module that would deliver them, that would wrap them up in the right way.
Okay.
Kind of make that binding between React and our model.
Oh, sweet.
But yeah, definitely.
What are
all of our components that we've got built in?
Oh yeah, there's a lot already built in. I was just going to
say that. Well, no, but the components that we have built in are built around React, libraries that are out there. So it's not like we have plenty of components that we've handwritten, but there's also some that, like the charting library right now, is just based off of charting libraries that are out there. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it looks really clean. So in your opinion, what are the top 5 new features of the top 5 selling points of Ignition 8.0?
All right, so maybe from the point of view from somebody who already knows Ignition, I'm trying to sell them on 8, or maybe I'll take this from 2 directions.
Okay, yeah, maybe someone looking to upgrade.
Yeah, well, there are. Yeah, so let's see, 5 things. First of all, we've already talked about perspective. I think it's a completely innovative product I don't know anything like it in this industry or outside of this industry. So just the power you have to build these modern apps is really incredible. Another point, we've completely overhauled the tag system. So that's maybe kind of a boring subject, data model, tags, tags and all that. But it basically, it's much more performant. It's much more scalable, and it's more extensible. So it's a foundation for us to add a lot in the future. But even right now, the end user can benefit from that a little bit with some of the new features in there. Ignition 8's much more security focused. We've always taken security very serious, but now we've kind of upgraded the technology to be much more modern. So we've got support for 2-factor authentication, for federated identity providers, and then lots of little things that kind of lead people to more secure systems. Like we're trying to better certificate management and stuff like that. Another point is that we've restructured the way that projects are stored to be stored in a very straightforward manner on disk, which makes it completely compatible with source control systems, which is huge. Our customers have been begging us for source control compatibility for a long time, and so now the entire project system can be thrown into Git or whatever you want, and then that opens up so much power, not just for being able to roll back or track changes, but if you think of how powerful, if you're familiar with Git at all or these modern systems, how powerful it is to send changes across, to work with branches, to build your workflow around it, of having change sets that get created by somebody, and then they create a pull request where they say, I want to apply these changes to our system, and then somebody has to approve those. It's really great. It really opens up, I think, a ton of potential for enterprises who have more sophisticated development scenarios going on. And then along those lines, the final point I would say is our new project inheritance system, the way we've structured projects now, which helps to also support what we've seen from enterprise ignition development scenarios. And so what I mean by that, we've got, when we started, ignition, was an integrator sitting down with the designer, creating something, and on one gateway. And now we've got companies with 20, 50 designers at a time operating on different gateways that represent different levels of their enterprise, trying to send resources all over the place, trying to, you've got central engineering at headquarters trying to send resources to a site, in a different part of the world, have those resources be usable but not changeable, and then but let the site override things, all that kind of stuff.
You could set some of that stuff up with the EAM module, right?
Yeah, so we've definitely grown. We've definitely continued to add functionality that helps with that. And then this is just another component. This new project inheritance hierarchy makes it much cleaner for to create like a project where you've got like your site project that inherits from your headquarter standards and or regional standards and headquarters. It's just a lot cleaner. And so we think that's going to be anywhere where we can take things that are possible but complicated to make them a little bit cleaner and simpler. We're always excited about that. So
a lot of people, I'm finding myself trying to manage those standards. How did you guys come up with the idea behind like how those projects are to be managed?
Well, to some degree, we were kind of, you're familiar with how it was before with the, you had the global project and then your individual projects, right? A lot of it's just growing pains, right? We arrived at that having grown from just individual projects, and then people want to have things that are more reusable. So we had the global project, and then they want to.
It just keeps expanding layer after layer of modularity.
Yeah. So then finally, we just stepped back and said, what is it that we're trying to achieve, right? We had a few things that it helped us clean up. If I'm, for example, we had resources that were kind of split between, is this in a project or is it in the global space? Is an alarm pipeline part of your project or part of your gateway? Is your transaction group, saying, those kinds of things. So this let us clean that up. And so that's the first step, is it just helps us to organize our own resources better. Then the next thing is now knowing the way that people want to share things, send them around and reuse them. It helps us to formalize that pattern, right? It just helps us to describe it in a cleaner way. You say, well, okay, you can have your project here. This is your base project, and you can pick if people are allowed to extend or overwrite those resources, or if they're what level of control they have over them. And then using the EAM, using our various functionality, you can synchronize those out to different locations. So we definitely have, there's always a lot more we can do. But this just helps us to kind of clean up the picture. And give us a good place to start.
That's amazing, man. It wasn't that long ago. I remember when like the gateway name wasn't even in the designer browser tag. So if you'd be working on multiple gateways, you wouldn't really be able to tell. And now we're having like the gateway system manager, the gateway launcher. Now you could manage like hundreds of gateways and just open them up. And same thing with your vision clients and perspective clients. So the top 5 features: perspective, the tag engine is rebuilt, the security, flat file change management, and
source control
project inheritance for enterprise projects.
Yeah.
That's huge, man. Yeah, that's a big release.
Those 5 that I can think of, yeah.
And perspective itself is really like its own new platform.
Yeah, it's a whole new thing. It's a whole new visualization system, but it benefits from everything that Ignition does, right? So it benefits from the security model that we put in place, from the tag model, from the binding model, the things. We really tried to, stay true to the reasons why people like working in Ignition, right? Like people, I think on the whole, really like the way you put things together in Ignition. And that, that comes from just, how we've started and how we've built it over the last 10 years. So we didn't want to throw all that out the window just to create something new, right? So the trick was to build something, for this new technology that leverages all that. So that's, an important part of it.
You know, what I want to, what I'd want to see built in ignition. I had this crazy idea. I'm like,
what's that?
We should build ignition inside of ignition.
That's very meta, right?
Like build the designer,
and
then you could build your own projects and
build it. Oh, build the designer. Yeah, that's a good question. You should be asking, like, when's the designer going to be in, perspective? But, yeah, we get that.
You're putting the designer in perspective?
No, we're not. But I'm just saying, that's the first thing people, a lot of people ask. They go, well, okay, that's cool. When you're going to have like, when's it all going to be pure web or whatever? Which is whatever. That's a fine question, but we don't see the need at this moment. But ignition and ignition.
I'm thinking of
I see some of the, no, you know what? You're not the only one, man. I see some of the things people put together. People do some pretty amazing stuff through like scripting and whatnot. And I've seen, we've always had them. Maybe we're a little bit too narrow focused in the way we think about it, but we've always thought about, like, okay, you go in there, you design your project, you deliver that project. That's what the operator sees and uses. And then now so much of it's around like wanting to deliver like ultimate flexibility to the end user. They want, like, well, okay, I want to start there, but I want to be able to add components. I want to move them around. I want to be able to save those screens. They're basically talking about, full design for the end user.
I had it once where when you logged in, depending on what time of day it would say like good morning into the operator. You have any questions for me?
Oh man, I don't know. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but you've been going all over the world. You've been talking to a lot of people. So I'm, there's a lot of things I could ask, but let me ask this one. Since you've been going to all these different spaces and all these different shows, and everyone's talking about all these different things, how do you see the like the various industrial market segments kind of interacting and converging, if that makes sense, right? We've always said the world is a big place. We've got all these different sectors, but it feels like technology is mixing things up, in a kind of a crazy way. What's your perception of that? Like, where are we at from a industrial technology point of view?
Wow, man, it's a
big question, huh?
Yeah, I know, right? Okay, so
I can come up with something a little simpler.
No, that works. People are starting to get it more. They're starting to embrace technology more. The common theme is, I think, as we continue to automate and, our jobs kind of become further abstracted from like how we actually feed ourselves. I think more and more what's going to be important is companies that have like actual missions and values beyond just profit. Mm-hmm. Because at a certain point, it kind of starts to become a little bit meaningless, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to have some underlying mission, like, bringing manufacturing back to the United States, making manufacturers more competitive, or, empowering system integrators to deliver amazing projects, in React, using perspective for their customers. Like, there's got to be some, living a healthy lifestyle. Like, what are some of your guys' core values at Inductive?
Well, I'd say our core value right now is
you got the four pillars.
Yeah, we do. Those kind of describe the way we go about kind of, those are the core of how they embody what we try to deliver, which is basically, I mean, now you're testing me on what those four pillars are. But, long story short, it's about delivering value. That's the number one thing, right? Like, there's so many companies out there that are, based on their current situation, where they're trying to extract more value out of their customer, right? They're trying to, it's about the profits, about the quarterly returns, all that stuff. And so they're trying to squeeze what they can out of their license base. We have a different situation. We're trying to deliver as much value as we can to that base into the new potential customer. So delivering value is one of my important key points, and then doing it in a way that's, fair and, fair for everyone, for ourselves included, I think is important. So that's one of the things I care very greatly about, just really that everything we do delivers actual value for what you're paying, right? Yeah, I mean,
Where's the
I think
future
that
of Inductive? If you had to choose VR, AR, or AI, where is like Inductive seeing the biggest
AI.
opportunity?
Oh, for us right now, it'd be AI. I wouldn't even hesitate to say AI. For us, for the type of company we are, for what our current technology set is towards, right? AR, VR, visualization technology, that is cool, but it depends on the data behind it and what it is you're trying to show. And data and display are what we're trying to work towards. I mean, that's like part of what we do. But AI plays a huge part in that, right? In terms of taking this mountain of data that we have coming in now and making sense out of it, pulling out really cool, information from it, driving cool information from it is what excites me, and I think is close to what we've been trying to do for a while.
What can
now.
we
So I
expect?
think
Are we going to look at like maybe having some sort of third party partner with an AI analytics company, or is that something you guys are looking at developing in house, or how does that? What are you guys' visions for AI?
I think there's a lot of different components to it. I think when it comes to AI and machine learning, it's one of those things where, just like our start was by leveraging the technology that was in the space, this open technology to let customers do as much as they could in the shortest amount of time. I think we're seeing a very similar situation with that today, right? When you look at the, all the cloud services that are available, all these different companies that are, doing all this machine learning, building these engines, and you've just got so many resources at your disposal. It would make no sense for us to try to just like can that up in a bottle that up and sell it. It's about, we definitely have to leverage that. But that said, our trick, what we deliver is to take something that's complex and infinitely powerful and make it applicable to like pragmatically applicable to what people are trying to do in their plants, right, or in their companies. So there's a lot of exciting things we can do in that space, and I definitely think we'll be getting around to that sooner rather than later. So that's something,
That's
I
huge,
don't have
man.
any specifics. I don't have any
that's awesome.
launch dates, but it is definitely something that's exciting to us. It's it kind of ties to I was going to ask you. When I got started here in 2003 or 2006, when we're first trying to present out to the market, we used to get a lot of people who would say, well, hey, I need to install this system and know that's going to last for 20 years. It's this idea of a 20-year system, right? Which seems ridiculous now. Just, I don't think anybody talks like that. If they do say that, they shouldn't, right? So how is you know what I'm talking about, though,
Yeah,
right? Like,
100%. Yeah.
Like how has that mentality changed, right? I don't think anybody's saying that. Everyone they know they need to be more agile than that, right? And so I lost track of what I was trying to get to on that. But
you guys have been huge disruptors in the market, man. It's been amazing.
I know what I was going to say, though, that in order to pull it off, it's still that, you can't have this industrial space is still not going to be able to just put in every bleeding edge technology, So there's a middle ground. We don't need systems that are 20 years old, and we can't put in the thing that came out yesterday. So
somewhere in
there's a
between
place
20
where
years
it all
and
kind of comes.
yesterday.
Yeah, and I really feel like we're getting there. We're really close on this on some of this machine learning and AI stuff to where we can get some really solid, applicable useful applications out of it really soon. I mean, we've been scratching at it. The industry broadly has been scratching at it for a while now. So I mean, it's going to happen, and people are using it right now. But I see roughly that mostly are you familiar, this Gardner hype cycle of you have like the spark of innovation, and then it's like then you got the hype the peak of hype, and then you go into this trough of disillusionment, and then I forget what the last point is, like realizing towards like the actual like plateau of productivity, right? That's the idea. I think right now we're in the trough. We're pretty much squarely in the trough. People are like, they're like, they have all this technology out there. They have some serious like, FOMO going on. Everyone's like afraid they're missing the wave, but then they putting all this money into it, and they're like, what are we getting out of it? But we're getting there. Like the actual applications are getting there. And so I think in the next 3 years, 2 years or so, we're going to hit a real level with this stuff that's going to start to pay off. So,
oh man, who would you want to see on the podcast and hear their story on the Zack Scriven podcast?
All right, yeah, that's a good question, and I mean, I think that it's a little tough to answer because it's like the people I like to hear from are the people I don't even know yet. So I like that you're just getting around to like all sectors of the industry and find all these people. But two people that come to mind that I've always enjoyed hearing from, and I've been around them like a lot, but I could always like I always get excited to hear more from them, are like Tom Burke, who has been involved with the OPC Foundation forever. He was like president for a long time, and then now he's I think he's in like the marketing position, but like that guy is super interesting. He's been in the industry forever. He started off with Rockwell. He was at Microsoft, and he was like there at the beginning of OPC, which I think is like such a crucial turning point for our industry, because like we only exist, in my opinion, because of OPC where it was at the time. So I think that's kind of cool. I'd like to hear from him and just hear more about how
Tom Burke. You said? Okay, yeah, Tom Burke. We'll have to shout him out and see if we can get him on the podcast.
For sure. I don't know. He's a busy guy, but I mean, like I said, I've managed to cross paths with him a lot over the years, but we never really got to like sit down and talk about like, what it was like getting started with OPC, what it was like at the time with those companies, and then kind of like his opinion on how the industry has changed. The other person who's really interesting is, and the company is doing really interesting things, is Albert Roykers. I think that's his last name. It's but Albert over at Bedrock Automation. Those are the guys. Bedrock's doing their new generation, super hardened, security focused PLCs. They've been working on it for a few years, and Albert is like the mastermind behind that. And he's a really, really interesting guy. I really enjoy being around him. I can't get enough of hearing from him, so I think that's another option. Like that. I mean, I think you could really get into some cool stuff with those guys.
Yeah, I love Bedrock's new OSA remote. That thing is really nice.
Is that have you played with it?
No, I haven't personally played with it, but I've seen videos like on Corso. They've unboxed it and played around with it, and just obviously the original controller was amazing and still is. With the Black Magic backplane, or what is it exactly?
Black Fabric or something.
Black Fabric, yeah.
It's super cool stuff. I don't get too involved with that like hardware layer, but I think Steve like has one up at his desk, and I think that's what he's been like just like raving about. He just loves it. He thinks it's like.
Can you run Edge on board on that?
Oh man, I don't know yet. I know we definitely talked about it. I think the capability is there. I remember our discussions from like the original Bedrock controller, where like it could be possible, but they weren't sure yet how much of that like outside application kind of potential they wanted to embrace.
Right.
So and like putting Java on there and all that. But so I'm not totally sure yet.
What I like that Opto22 has done is they've done a really good job about, combining the PLC and the Edge device, putting Ignition on it, Ignition Edge, and just going to have that work seamlessly.
On Epic? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah,
that's a cool device. Yeah, man, that's a pretty sweet device too. We just put together a demo at the ARC forum. Is pretty awesome. It had it's a little bit overpowered, right? But we had this like kids claw game that was being run by a Groove over MQTT to perspective on the phone. So you could like pick up candy at the claw game and and that's all going natively on the Epic. That had Edge on it natively going up to the cloud. So I think it's kind of, pretty cool stuff.
That's awesome, dude. Well, thank you for jumping on again and, for being on the podcast in the first place. So I appreciate it, man.
I mean, thanks for inviting me and, keep it up. I really enjoy seeing all this, like I said already, like, you know, like you going out to the world, talking to all these different people, these different parts of the sector really, you know, helps people like me who's, you know, stuck in the office most of the time, kind of get out there in the world. So
Thank you,
good
man.
luck, man. Keep it up.
Peace out, guys.
All right. Thank you.